listening to Living with ADHD and CPTSD, available on Apple and wherever you get your podcasts. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Living with ADHD and CPTSD. Today's ADHD episode, I have a special guest on my show today. Her name is Jamie and she calls herself a Stigma Breaker. She has a community on Twitter called Stigma Breakers and is also the host of a Stigma Breakers podcast. Welcome Jamie to my show. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Absolutely. So, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience and we'll get started.
So, like Russ said, my name is Jamie. I work as a social worker doing medical care coordination at an HIV clinic. And I've been doing that for about 11 years. I myself am diagnosed with ADHD and several other diagnoses, but which is why I'm so passionate about what we're about to talk about today.
Awesome, that's great. So you are, as we discussed before this show, you are in the Latina community, and you are a Latina as well. Latino. I want to make sure I get the word right. But
Don't worry.
okay, so you're in
The
the
political
minority
term
community.
now is Latine, which I think that's how you say it. But I mean, Latino is also kind of plural, but to be inclusive to all genders and identities,
Right,
the new term is Latine. Not everybody in the Latino community loves that term, but
right.
it's out
It
there
takes
for
a while
whoever,
for it
however
to,
you want
yeah.
to. Yeah, it takes a
Okay,
while for people to get.
okay. All right, excellent. So yeah, you are in California and you're in the
Mhm.
big city of Los Angeles and
Yes.
you have ADHD and I've seen your posts on Twitter for a while and I'm actually it's been very a lot of they're very interesting and you obviously have a lot of passion for what you're doing and you've talked to me a lot about your own struggles with having ADHD as a younger woman living in a country whose mental health support is not exactly top notch and being in a minority race as well in a state of 30 oh my god 30 some million people.
Yeah.
It must be I would imagine that your experiences in your journey to where you are now has been quite vast and good, maybe like a lot of ups and downs along the way, I'm sure.
Yeah, so I was just diagnosed with ADHD. I learned that I had ADHD a year ago. So I like to describe myself as a baby fawn, and I'm just learning how to walk again with my new knowledge because
Yeah.
I just grew up thinking that I was just broken and I sucked and I was lazy and stupid and all of these mean things that you just kind of grew up hearing. But yeah, it's been quite the journey. To find out that I had ADHD was pretty life changing, and I know that's like I'm not being dramatic when I say that. It really changed my life. I really had to start thinking and moving and doing things very differently. I understood that my brain was not, it didn't work like everybody else's, and that I needed to start doing things in a way that worked for my brain. And
Right.
changing that way that I thought, it started to help me live up. It really raised and it made my quality of life a lot better.
Excellent. So what are some of the challenges that you had before the diagnosis, like that you noticed were really making your day-to-day life feel impossible or just like such a struggle? Yeah, because I know that everybody, they all have their own times where they just feel like they can't, like it's impossible, like they have a hard time getting out of bed and or a hard time going to work.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, so when I was younger, I always knew I had depression and anxiety. Like the earliest documented was in my journal when I was in middle school. I was in high school and I found one of my journals and I looked at it and I was like, holy crap, I was very depressed when I was in middle school. Like, wow, how sad. Um,
yeah,
but so I always like figured everything that I dealt with was related to the way that I was raised, some of the trauma that I experienced when I was a younger child, and even in my young adult life. I was just like, oh, it's just depression, it's just anxiety, it's just my panic attacks that I have, and that's why I'm the way that I am. That's why I don't like to do this. So
right.
the biggest thing that was really happening to me before I got diagnosed was I was having constant panic attacks. I was very overwhelmed at work. I got super behind on my paperwork, on everything, anything that had to do with my job. It was I was behind. So the fact that I was
Mm.
already behind and my job had a lot of demands and it was just I was not mentally well, like I had severe depression, I had really bad anxiety, I was having constant panic attacks. And right before doing the job that I'm doing now, I had got laid off. And I was really having a hard time reading. I couldn't and I had noticed this, but because I was laid off and I had so much time during the pandemic to like pay attention to myself, I started noticing things like I can't read articles, nothing. I would have 30 pages of articles that I would read. I'm going to read this, and then I'll like just not read them. I couldn't even like people tweeted me like a paragraph. Like it was hard for me to just finish reading it because like my thoughts would
Right.
interrupt me so much, and I wasn't aware of
Yeah.
that then. But and just even having so many ideas and not and that was like this probably is the biggest thing for me, like having so many ideas and being good at having ideas and not being able to execute them. So the
Right.
executive function, I would say the executive dysfunction was probably the most impairing thing for me.
Yeah, that's
Then
accurate.
that's
Yeah.
what I would have know if back then I would have known even when I was a child, when because they want to know like was this present when you're a child. And I remember my mom and other people would say that I was a very daydreamy child. I was always lost in thought, which is something very common in women or people who are diagnosed with an inattentive ADHD.
Yeah.
So I remember people telling me that I was always like a daydreaming in the clouds, and my one of my uncles asked my mom like, "Is there something wrong with her? Because she's like always just like stuck," and that's always like you always describe me as ditzy or stuck, or very messy, disorganized, late, like all if you list the whole list of like when I like read the list of inattentive type ADHD, I was like, oh, this is me. Like
Yeah,
although like
absolutely.
this is literally describing me, and I was like, oh my god, I feel so seen. Yeah.
Yeah, I know how that feels. Absolutely. That was the same way for me. All the different things that I read and going, yeah, that's me, that's me. I do that. Yes, yes. And it was like constant, like I think my test score, well, my survey that I did with my doctor, the score that you could get was, I think it was 30, and I had a 23 or a 24, which was in the high area because there's certain numbers. And yeah, like I had a 23, which was in the high, and I remember going, okay, well, this reassures me. And that when I sent that to the doctor, it, you could tell the next visit was a very different attitude by him because he saw that, yeah, this is pretty clear. So that was helpful.
Yeah, and it was just really hard to just do anything. I mean, it's definitely improved, but what really led me to like seek help was just my panic attacks. And
Right.
it was it's okay. Sorry, I'm gonna try to go in a linear way, but my mind does not work in a linear mind, so I'm like be jumping
No,
around between my timeline. So let me actually
absolutely.
retract to a time during that pandemic when I was laid off and I was hanging out with my brother's fiance, who was a registered nurse. And I was just telling her how it was hard for me to get to focus, but I thought my problems with focus had to do with my obsession with my phone, because I also
Uh,
do struggle with like addiction to my phone and my cell phone and Twitter. I was very, I'm a little better now, but I was very obsessed and addicted to Twitter back in the days, like
yeah.
2 years, like yeah, my God, 2 years ago. I was really into Twitter. And she was like, you know what? Let me do this questionnaire, like just for fun. Let's just do this questionnaire. It's an ADHD one. Let's just kind of see, because I was like complaining about my attention, and I scored severe. And we were like laughing about it, like, oh, that's so funny. You scored severe. And like I didn't
Wow.
think anything much about that. We were just like doing it for fun, but it was just this assessment she does for her like at work for like as a nurse, and so I just forgot about that until I started work again. And when I started work again after being laid off, like I knew I wasn't mentally well, but the
Yeah.
pandemic was still going on. So I was like, I need to go back to work. So I went back to work, because that also meant I would get insurance, because I tried to find a therapist online, just to pay out of pocket, and it was just too expensive, or it was just like it
Yeah.
was just not, I didn't find good resources. So I need to go back to work, because I know I'm going to get insurance and I'll be able to see a therapist. So I'm back to work, and it was a lot more demanding than what I've had before. And I was just not really in a good place. Like I said, my depression and my anxiety were really severe, which means everything else gets severe. Like if your depression anxiety is severe, your ADHD is severe. So then
Yeah.
you feel crap about your ADHD, and then everything makes everything worse, right? Everything. So I'm
Totally.
just like feeling miserable and trying to just function and like do my job. And I got so behind at work, to the point where I was recently in danger of losing my job.
Right.
And uh, it wasn't until February of last year, when I started working with my therapist, Maria, that she noticed and said, you know what? A lot of women go and diagnose with ADHD because they usually say it's depression or anxiety. You like, I'm gonna do an assessment on you, and then we'll see what happens. And she did the assessment. She's like, yep, you scored severe. And I'm like, oh yeah, I remember, like I scored severe with my friend, my sister-in-law. So she was like, yeah, so I'm gonna do a referral for you to see the psychiatrist, and then maybe you start your evaluation process. So that
Yeah.
happened, and they said, we can't put you on medication, so we're gonna start, let's just treat your depression and anxiety first. And I had never taken meds for anything ever,
Right.
and I've
Yeah.
had learned coping tools to deal with depression and anxiety. So I'm like, no, I'm fine, like I've been dealing with this my whole life, I'm okay, I don't need that. And they're like, well, there's this medication that helps with ADHD and depression. I was like, and I was so desperate. I knew that I had it, and I was like, okay, I just need something. So I agreed to start on Wellbutrin.
Okay.
And yeah, so actually, Wellbutrin, I did really well. I love Wellbutrin. I did really well on it. It helped my anxiety, it helped my depression. And I didn't think it helped me with my ADHD till I stopped Wellbutrin. I'm like, wait a minute, I think it did help with ADHD, because when I got off it, when I was transitioning to my new ADHD medication, which is Strattera, a non-stimulant, we'll get
Yeah.
into why I'm taking a non-stimulant in a little bit. Um, I noticed that I had a period of like a disaster, that I
Oh.
had like gotten a sense of like being able to get a little bit of control. Like I finally got caught up when once I started learning like coping tools. I started working with an ADHD coach. I was able to finally start catching up and stay current at work, which is had not been able to before. Being with my ADHD coach, I was not current in my work. I was still
Wow.
staying getting behind constantly. Like it was really severe.
Excellent.
And yeah, and so when I started working with my coach, I was able to stay current, but I was still struggling. And then this last January, I felt behind again. And
Mm.
and that's when they started kind of like, hey, you have this pattern. And that's when I started getting in trouble at work. It started catching up to me. Like I was kind of getting away with it, but it was so bad that I couldn't get away with it anymore. And
Right.
so I started getting in trouble at work, getting like threatened that I was going to get written up because of my performance. And so that's when I finally, and then I went through like four different psychiatrists. Like it's just been like quite the journey
Wow.
with that. So I did ended up getting evaluated for ADHD eventually, of April last year in
Yeah.
2021. And the
Okay.
results came back they came back inconclusive because my depression and anxiety were so severe that they were like, we don't feel comfortable giving you the diagnosis of ADHD because you have too much going on. So we
Oh,
can't say what's
jeez.
what. Because if you look at the symptoms, like if you do those Venn diagrams, like there's a lot of very like parallel symptoms. It's like we don't know what's what, so we're not going to
Right.
treat you for this. Like just keep treating your anxiety and your depression. And I was still trying to find the right um, like balance of medication. And then they added Lexapro on it. No, actually, I was taking Zoloft. Then they switched me to Lexapro. Anyway, my fourth psychiatrist, which has been my favorite psychiatrist, he's not perfect, but he's the only one that like took ADHD serious for me. Like he's like, I believe
Good.
you. I see what you're saying. Um, well, things have changed, like the policies have changed within the company. I can't really put you through another evaluation. What I can do is start you on Stratera and see if that works. And I can write
Hmm.
you letters and we can start your accommodations at work for, like, even if you don't have, even not for ADHD, like you can get accommodations for depression and anxiety. I'm like, oh, I didn't know I can get accommodations for depression and anxiety.
Oh,
He's
wow.
like, yeah. So then I said, okay, let's start that. And so he just wrote me a general letter saying that he was treating me for mental health, and I had certain conditions that affected me in my performance, and I needed certain accommodations. So the recent psychiatrist I got finally took my ADHD serious, and he gave me my accommodations letter. I submitted for accommodations. That saved my butt because I was literally going to get fired. Not that I
Right.
did, and they thought, oh, she's doing this because she's gonna get fired. Like, no, like I've been working on this. It just took a long time for me to finally get somebody to like give this. And this is where I saw the lack of knowledge. Like my company wasn't even prepared. Like they don't have anything in place for ADHD. They were just like, we know it's recognized by the ADA. Like, what do you need? And we might give it to you. Let's see what we can provide to you. And it
Right.
was very limited. It was a very frustrating experience. But he started me on the Stratera. He gave me the accommodations. And finally, I started to find a groove where I started to, the medication kicked in, and I'm still working with my ADHD coach. And they knew what was going on. My team was like, okay, we're going to work with you. We're going to retrain you. They started giving me all of these things. And last year, this month, I was 6 months behind. This
Yeah.
month, I scored 100% on compliance reports.
Nice. That's
And that is
perfect.
a huge win. That is a huge win for me because I was like, wow,
Absolutely.
last year, this time around, I was 6 months behind. And I'm current in my work and I'm getting a hold. I'm not in trouble anymore. My brain's working better. I'm on medication. I'm learning my brain. And it was just I was able to finally do things that I couldn't do before, like
Yeah.
launching my podcast, which is something that I wanted to do a year ago, right around the time before I got diagnosed or like told that I had ADHD. um I tried to launch a podcast and I was just a prisoner of my mind. I had so
Yeah.
many things besides ADHD affecting me, like insecurities, imposter syndrome, like just fear of myself because I knew that I always start things and I never finish them. I have
Yeah.
a bunch of unfinished tasks. I haven't even finished my degree, and somehow I've made it and got a career without a degree, but not, that's just me being lucky and finding just the right things. But yeah, I came to a point in like my career, like what I do. I don't have a degree in my field. I do social work, but now, like I need a degree. I need more. So now that
Yeah.
I have all the resources, I'm able to do what I want now. I can go back to school and finish school, and I'm so excited. I could do my
Excellent.
podcast now, and
Yeah.
I'm not gonna get fired. So my
That's
life
yeah.
has really, really, really improved since finding out that I had ADHD. Like finding out was one of the best things that has happened to me, and getting the proper treatment and learning the best thing that you can do for yourself. People, if you're listening, like learn about your conditions, like what you have. If you learn
Yeah.
about your brain and how you work, you will learn to understand yourself. You will stop hating yourself, because I also dealt with self-loathing my whole life. I grew up hating myself. I hate you was I hate myself was like a constant word in my brain all the time, and that's not anymore. That's very rare now. I'm much more
Good.
nicer to myself. I have much more compassion with myself, and I just give myself more grace and just living life, because my brain does not work like everybody else's, and it's okay. And I love my brain. I love that I have ADHD. There's some good stuff to having ADHD, and I'm learning to embrace that. And some people are like, oh, learn to use your ADHD as a superpower. And I'm kind of on that journey, like, okay, how can I use this? I'm like, we are literally idea machines. But the issue is
Yeah,
like executing them. So now I'm working on how can I execute all these ideas that I've been having, and little by little, it started to happen. So I'm really, really happy where I am now.
excellent. That's great. Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned that we're idea machines and that we have tons of ideas. And I actually a long time ago, I remember I was looking up information on creative like ADHD people having very creative minds. And the one thing I remember seeing a stat was is they were saying on average people with ADHD when they're coming up with these ideas or like new things or even if it's like okay, I'll just say like inventions or ideas or business plans or projects out of 10 ideas 3 will work and the rest of them they're really crazy or not possible because they just don't have the resources or the technology to do it, but these thoughts are beyond what they can do. But there are those that will work and that are actually are great ideas. So yeah, it's impressive how when ADHD, because our minds are going and going and going, and if especially if we are doing something that is extremely fun or we really like it, like it's something that we have a passion for, we will be on it and go forever. Like or else, like it's I have a few things that I really love doing that if it wasn't for sleep or eating, I would probably be out there doing it all the time, and I could go and go and go. It's and because of the ADHD, there's that hyper focus that you just going and you're so into it and it's so like consuming that before you know it, a whole afternoon could go by and next thing you know it's like 8 o'clock at night and you haven't had dinner yet and you're going, oh, I have to eat now, I completely forgot about dinner, or I haven't done laundry, like there's things that also need to be done, but because you're so focused in on that one task that you're so into that you lose track of everything else. So there's that great power, like you said, superpower. It's just the opposite effect, right? Like if you have no interest or it's like, well, okay, I'll do it because I know it has to get done. There's that it's a good possibility that you're going to either lose interest or something else will distract you and pull you away and then you won't go back. It's a very common theme with people with ADHD.
Yeah, I think it really is about learning to work with your brain, not against it. That's why it's so
Yeah.
important to learn how your brain works and learning all of these coping tools that are available for ADHD brains. I mean, it is a lot. There's a lot of research out there. There's a lot of tools and help. There's coaching. There's cognitive behavior therapy. There's so many things that are out there that I think it's so important for us to really take advantage of those things so that we can
Yeah.
thrive in this world that's really not built for us.
Absolutely. There are a lot of tools out there, both I want to say chemically, like with the drugs, the medication, and there's self help things that we can do, right? Like there's so many. If any research out there, it's pretty straightforward. Like they say, if you're hesitant on the medication because you're not sure if you really want to do it yet, there's obviously like you can improve your diet, you can change what you're eating because there are foods out there that are more beneficial for brain function. There's an extra like a consistent exercise routine because they say that you can like increasing the oxygen in the bloodstream and in the brain helps with function. There's proper sleep. Like there's all these different alternative ways that you can introduce into your life that will help reduce the symptoms. And some, like, the major things that they always say to avoid when it comes to ADHD is, like, try to not have any caffeine, try to eliminate foods that have sugar, processed type foods, anything that will take and affect your system in a negative way, because, like, caffeine, whether it's from a coffee or from a cola, is going to
Mm-hmm.
obviously do the opposite effect of what you want, because you want your brain to be able to focus and to be able to feel in control, and that just makes it worse. Like, so there's all these little things that people can do to help make their ADHD more manageable. And yeah.
Yeah, and I really had to do that for myself because one of the things I missed to say that after I did my evaluation and it came out to be inconclusive, the fact that that came out inconclusive and I didn't get the ADHD diagnosis, my clinic actually blocked me from being able to get a stimulant to treat my ADHD. So they only gave me the option to try Strattera. Like that was just like it was that or like I think I had the option just to try non-stimulants, and we
Yeah.
just went with Strattera with my psychiatrist. But then they said like if you want to still go and get diagnosed somewhere else, and you just have to go to another clinic and they have to give you the stimulants. And even if you go somewhere else to another psychiatrist, if we find out that you went to another psychiatrist and get ADHD medication, like a stimulant, like we have to discontinue services with you. So I couldn't even see my therapist. So thankfully, the Strattera has been working for me.
Yeah.
Although I would still like to try stimulants because of my barriers to even get medicated, and I finally got medicated with Strattera like just 2 months ago. I had to lean in on like good sleep, exercise, amazing for the ADHD brain. I have to
Yes.
vouch for that, and not only for ADHD but depression and anxiety, insomnia. It helped me with my insomnia. I had
Totally.
little to no anxiety. My depression was a lot better, and my brain just functioned better when I was like constantly exercising. I started weightlifting a lot,
Oh, excellent.
and
Cool.
yeah, weightlifting was my exercise. Just any exercise as long as good, as long as you get that like oxygen in your brain and you're like balancing is really good. Like yoga is really good. It kind
Yeah.
of helps focusing your brain, like teach your brain how to like focus so that you don't fall. It's some there's like I've read some things about that. So those are kind of the tools. I really had to lean in hard on the tools and the coping tools because I didn't have access to medication. Even if I wanted to, I didn't have access for a long time after finding out I had ADHD. So even just adding those coping tools, my life got improved. I just did better. But I when the medication kicked in, like that really took my functioning to a different level, and I just felt a lot better. And I know now combining medication with the coping tools, you can do so much. You really can
No kidding.
just have you can execute. You're no longer dysfunctional at that point, really.
Yeah.
But at least less
Absolutely.
dysfunctional. I really do feel a lot better now. Thankfully that I've got the care.
Well, that's good. Now, I'm curious, because the only medication I've done is a stimulant. Um, when you started taking the non-stimulant, what was the thing that you noticed first? Like, because obviously I know that it's not going to be the very first day that all of a sudden you're going, whoa, but, like, when you started taking it and eventually it started to work, what was it that you noticed it was doing? Like, because I'm really curious the difference, like,
Hmm.
from a person's, like, I know you haven't taken the stimulant medication, so
Yeah.
unfortunately we can't do a comparison, but
Hmm.
when it started to take effect, what did you notice that it did? Like, what was the big change that it was doing for you?
So, like I mentioned, I started with Wellbutrin, which is also prescribed for ADHD, and it's a NNSNRI, so it's a norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor, and
Wow.
Strattera is the same. It's the same kind of medication. So I didn't really experience that many side effects when I transitioned because they had the same properties.
Right.
So I did have because my doses switched lows, I noticed that I could focus less. I was forgetful. I was a lot more forgetful. That's what, kind of the things that I noticed. Like in between, I was losing things. I couldn't. I had insomnia. Like there's like all these little things that were kind of happening. So then it's been about almost a month since I started feeling the difference. And the first thing I noticed was one, I left my phone in a room somewhere and I was able to just stay engaged where I
Right.
was. Like we were out. I have a second job and I teach music with children. And
Oh,
we were
wow.
at an event and I was able to just stay engaged in like what was going on, talking with the kids, like having conversations with people. Because having conversations with people was a hard thing for me because I 2 seconds and my brain was gone. I don't know what you just said to me. So even me, like you and I talking right now, we were talking earlier. I did lose my train of thought sometimes, but I was almost aware of what was going on. I was able to get right back into it.
Cool.
So yeah, those are kind of the things. And like one of the, so that was one thing, like my interaction of being able to be aware and like present, more present. And I was able to sit still in my chair and do paperwork. Now I do have to use noise canceling headphones. My number one tip for being like for helping you focus, like noise canceling headphones have been life changing for me. And I also
Right.
listen to isochronic and binaural beats, and the combination of those two helped me sit there and just because I'm a social worker, so I'm like doing paperwork, doing notes, doing all kinds of things. So that helped me. I was able to sit for an hour or two just to do paperwork, even before with my headphones. Like I couldn't last maybe like 15, 20 minutes, and I had to go up and do something, or like it's just it was really hard for me to just get me to sit there and like do things for a long period of time. And I found myself I was able to sit there for an hour and work on my paperwork, which I was not able to do before.
Wow. That's incredible. That's quite the change just from the non-stimulant. Wow. Yeah, I'm. It's interesting. You mentioned about the headphones. I I actually, whenever I do my podcasts, or if
Hmm.
I'm, well, the odd time when I'm out doing something in the house, I forget. But most of the time when I'm doing something like making dinner, or I'm outside doing yard work, or I'm doing my, like I said, doing my podcast, I am wearing headphones, and the majority of the time, I either listen to podcasts, like I have a few that I like to listen to that are more educational, not necessarily like ADHD or anything, um, or I listen to music. And the one thing I've always found whenever I do that is my ability to stay on topic, or stay on task, and
On
find
task.
yeah, exactly, and say and find
Yeah.
regularity, like
Mm-hmm.
consistency in what I'm doing,
Mm-hmm.
is that it's helping. Because when I'm it's a focus thing. And
Yeah.
when I was younger, and this was long before the thought of ADHD came up, and I was dealing with some anxiety and stress, and it turned into that it was also ADHD related. Whenever I would, like, before I started this, I would go to bed and I would have a difficult time falling asleep, because my mind would wander, and it would wander on to anything, and eventually it would go to the point where it would be thoughts that were scary, or like traumatizing in a way. And at that point it was like, okay, forget it, I'm done now for a good hour or two, because I have to find a way to stop my mind from continuing to just go and more and more, and grow, and to the point where I would be up for hours. So it would take a good hour at least just to lay there and allow my brain to end, like to find a way to stop it. And so I remember going, I need to find something to help make to focus on, like, so that my brain can relax and I can fall asleep. And the irony is, most people there's a garden majority of people out there that when they are trying to sleep is they need quiet, right? They need silence because otherwise they can't fall asleep. It's just too much. Well, for me, it's having something on, and I would. It depended on what I was into. If I needed something to soothe me, I was putting on like my favorite artist's music, and I'd let it go play, and I'd set it for a few hours. Or eventually, what I ended up doing was I would play old radio shows from the 30s and 40s, and I'd let that go all night, and my brain would focus on the audio and the show. And so instead of thinking about bad, scary stuff, it was allowing me to fall asleep because my brain could focus and could stay relaxed. And that was my tool to fall asleep. And now that I have better control of everything. Like I'm not it, I'm able to kind of allow myself to fall asleep without allowing it to occur. I haven't had to really do it lately, but for the longest time, that's what I did because I knew that if I
Yeah.
went to bed with silence, there was a really good chance that my mind would start going and wandering
I could
and
not. I cannot
yeah,
go to sleep in silence. I need sound. It's either rain sounds, white noise, a show in the
yeah,
background, music. I can't. My mind is too loud. Like I always found silence loud. You ever feel like that? Like dead
yeah,
silence is so loud.
yeah,
I always, and that's probably because I was just so focused on like everything else. Just another clue that I had when I was younger that probably was ADHD, but I cannot go to sleep or do anything that requires me to like sit still or even to clean. I have to have something in the background, whether it's a podcast or music or isochronic
yeah,
tones or binaural beats, or else I can't do things. It's just I'll be everywhere. My mind, I'll get stuck or it's crazy,
absolutely,
but you find ways to make things
yeah,
happen, and my sleep is a lot
totally,
better.
yeah. Like it's amazing how a song or a show or something that your brain can listen to is improves your ability to do what you're doing. It's quite amazing because any other person would think that how can you do what you're working on when you have something in your head that's making noise and all whatever random stuff. It works because with an ADHD mind or even someone who has trauma, it
Hmm.
still works, right? it's
Yeah.
it's because your mind wanders and goes all over the place, and
Yes.
it goes here, it goes there, it goes, and it can come back, and then if it finds something that's has any potential, it can wrap itself around it, and then you get obsessed by it, and it can grow, it can expand,
Hmm.
and before you know it, you're sitting looking at nothing, and your
Hmm.
mind's just caught on to something, and 10-15 minutes can pass by, and all of a sudden something just kind of snaps you out of it and goes, oh shoot, 15 minutes has gone
It's
by and you've done nothing,
it's like 3 in the
and
morning.
yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
that noise, whether it's like you said, the sound of rain, or
Hmm.
like I actually, yeah, I did that too. I even forgot about that. Like I
Yeah.
would have different noises, like
Hmm.
natural kind of sounds. Even that,
Hmm.
it 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 allows the brain to stay on that. It
Yeah.
stays there, and that was enough to let me go. Okay, I am doing yard work. I have to get this
Hmm.
yard work done. I got to stay on it. The music or whatever I had is allowing my brain to stay on target, on one
Right.
thing,
Hmm.
and it does work. And that's the fascinating part about it, is that it
Yeah.
for an
Otherwise,
ADHD
you're
brain
like,
it
oh yeah, I
works.
gotta do something else, and then you leave to do whatever
Yep.
the other thought, that's I cannot explain what that is, but that's literally
No.
I that's the same thing that happens to me. Like I don't have those
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, let me do this because like I don't know, for some reason it just helps me maybe focus, like you said, like on the sound, that you don't have room to think of other things,
Yeah,
which is
exactly.
pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have evidence of when I wasn't doing that I
Hmm.
forgot something. Like I got in big trouble once because I went outside. It was in the wintertime, and here we get like, snow, of course. And I remember going outside and I grabbed the shovel, and in my brain at the time when I was before I started, I said, okay, I am going to do this. I'm going to go to the back and shovel the driveway, and then I'm going to go to the front and shovel the front. And I didn't have anything, so it was just noise and whatever. And I remember working so hard at the back that I didn't. I went to the front, and then all of a sudden, in my brain, I'm thinking, okay, I'm done. So I went inside, and I totally forgot to do the driveway. And even though I had said it to myself earlier, I didn't do it because I wasn't focused. I wasn't able to stay focused on this task, and it was because I had something. I got so overwhelmed into what I was doing currently that the realization that there was still one more area to do completely gone. I had no memory whatsoever of it.
Yeah, but even like just the headphones for some reason, because
Yeah.
even if I'm just listening to music like with a speaker, for example, when I'm in my office at work, I can still hear other sounds. That's why I feel
Yes.
I focus a lot better when it's just my ears are closed in. That's why I like the noise canceling headphones, because
Yeah.
it eliminates all sound but what you're listening to. And I think that's what, like we were saying, that's what allows me to stay there.
Yeah.
But I noticed a difference between like when with this new medication, that I was able to stay longer versus from 25 minutes to 30 minutes to an hour, which
Right.
was before medication. And knowing what ADHD was, for me to sit there and like get into a zone, I didn't know what that was. And now I can get into the
Absolutely.
zone, which is amazing,
Yeah.
which is I wanted that to happen, and it is finally a thing for me.
See, that's exactly, yeah, that's what your goal, that's what the goal of what you're doing is to have that ability to focus for a period of time and to do work or to do the task. And like even a norm like a neurotypical person who doesn't have an ADHD or any sort of, like, there's only so much time that they can go before they need to take a break. It's not humanly possible to go 8 hours without breaking. So being able to be as close as possible to that range is amazing. Like,
Yeah, I think I even hyper focus, and I'm like, I can't
yeah,
believe I'm hyper focusing on paperwork. Like, this is insane. It was like
yeah,
mind blowing to me. Like, I'm actually hyper focusing on paperwork. Like, wow, men's work. Yeah,
yeah,
because
that's
it does.
something. I
That's
know.
amazing. For
Yeah,
me, I was like, wow.
yeah, that's pretty cool. So, which you said that you were on Strattera. What other medications are you currently on? Like, you're taking an anxiety depression one, right?
Yeah, I'm taking Lexapro right now. So I take
Okay,
80 milligrams of Strattera and 10 milligrams of Lexapro, which is a citalopram. And then I
right,
have hydroxyzine for my emergency medication for like anxiety. But I
ah,
usually use it more for sleep, because
right,
it's sometimes I do have disrupted sleep patterns. So I'll if I can't sleep and I really have to get to sleep, or I haven't slept in a couple of days because I'm staying up late, I'm like, oh, I can't. I have to take my meds. So I have hydroxyzine as needed, and but then the Lexapro and the Strattera is what I use on a daily basis.
okay.
It's
Now
working for me. No anxiety.
that's excellent. Yeah, that's great. Like myself, I I try. Like, have you heard of Vyvanse?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to get on. That's what I asked because
Okay.
I wasn't sure I wanted to be on Strattera, and I knew how like they're so, it's a controlled substance, and people talk about like how they abuse it. And I'm like, fine, don't give me
Yeah.
Strattera, give me Vyvanse. So like, well, your insurance won't pay for it. It's too expensive. They're not gonna cover it. You have to pay out of pocket.
Wow.
I mean, they were giving me like, oh, there's a million barriers to getting care with ADHD. It's so ridiculous. It's one of my biggest
I know.
frustrations. I work in healthcare, so the health industry, the insurance industry is just one of my biggest pet peeves, and it causes me so much headaches. But yeah, that's what I wanted to try because I knew that it was supposedly less habit forming than Strattera, which how you know what I was tweeting about this the other day, like if ADHD medication is so addictive, like why do we keep forgetting to take it? Does that happen to you? Do you forget to take your meds? Cause like
Oh, yeah, I have a good routine built in the morning
yeah.
that reminds me because I have a method that has never failed, and it's so well built in that it's automatic. Like it's this, and then I also have a reminder that tells me, and it's constant. So it's not like it comes up once
Hmm.
and goes away. It stays,
Yeah.
and yeah, like holy smokes,
I
just
just
trying to
downloaded an app because I forgot my meds for 2 days and I did not have a good time.
right.
I
That's not
hopefully I
good.
never forget my meds again because I didn't take them from 2 days, and Monday was just this weekend. I didn't take my meds this weekend, and Monday was a very rough day. And I'm like, oh yeah, we're not doing this
Yeah,
again at a
I
rough
know.
time.
I know it. Yeah, it's hard when you don't want to miss because it's amazing the change. Like I haven't missed since I started, thankfully. Um,
Hmm.
it's
That's
it
good.
was yeah, but it's amazing how if this is what I am going to get into this real quick here.
Hmm.
Um, I have a real brief backstory as to my medication history, which is
I wanted to ask you about it, so if you would share with me,
yeah,
I would love that.
it's a little frustrating because you learn you don't know until you try other people, other doctors. You always think that you have it well until another person, right? Your second attempt or a third or fourth, and then you learn whether it was well or done right or not. But I I remember back in March of 2021, I I seen my therapist and we were discussing ADHD symptoms. And we went over it and I was being very thorough and he said, "What I think you have ADHD." And we kind of had that thought ahead of time, but we needed a professional's opinion to kind of start, right? And he said, "I think you have it, and what you can do." And this is the thing in Canada, like that's there's some different, really different struggles and benefits to where everybody is when I he said that I can go to my doctor, like my doctor, and I can say, I think I have ADHD and I would like to do a try, like for a few weeks, I want to try an ADHD medication to see what it will do. And I didn't know that was possible. I thought you had to do the diagnosis, you had to get the official word, and then you could get the medication. And so he said, yeah, go ahead and do that and ask him. And unfortunately, I didn't have a doctor at the time because mine had retired. And so I had to find a new doctor, and I the one that I was living in a different place at the time, and because there's only so many doctors out there that accept new patients, you can't. It's not like you can have your choice. Like where I am, I couldn't just choose who I wanted to go see, and I went to the practitioner, the general place, and they gave me a doctor, and I should have known from the beginning that it was going to be a struggle, but I was being naive and I didn't think anything of it until later. But the doctor was like, this part wasn't the issue. I didn't care about this. He's from South Africa, and so he has a South African accent on his English, so it's a little difficult, like for listening, and because I have a bit of hard of hearing, it's not exactly the easiest to understand. But the part that was really hard, and they did tell me at the beginning, is that he has a speech impediment. So not only was it a South African accent, it was on top of a speech impediment, which made it extremely difficult to understand what he was saying. And when he would talk, there were times where I maybe would understand one out of every four words that he was saying to me. And it was just, oh my God, like I think I know what he's saying, but I'm not sure. And I was kind of shy. I didn't really want to, like push him. And I remember going to him and saying, okay, I've been seeing a therapist for a long time, and he believes that I may have ADHD, and he said that I can ask a doctor for a trial to see what it is while I look at getting a diagnosis. And it was surprising how easy it was to get it. He didn't ask me he didn't really like give me any like inquisitive questions. He didn't have me do any kind of a survey or a questionnaire for him to look at and say, okay, looks like you may, or, like it was almost like he took my word for it. And he said, sure, okay, well, what we'll do is we'll start you off on this. It's 20 milligrams of Vyvanse, and we'll do it for a month, and we'll see how it is in a month. Come back, blah blah blah. And then he said, this is what I wasn't sure. He said something about referral for ADHD diagnosis. And so I went on my merry way and got the medication. And the first day it started, it took an hour or so, and I could tell like that day that there was an improvement, and it was a very big improvement. And my brain was like, there was just something different. I could feel something changing. And all of a sudden I felt a huge focus. Like I could focus on my stuff. I had concentration. And there was this kind of a weird, funny feeling in the front of my brain. And I wasn't sure what it was at first. I thought maybe it's just a side effect. Maybe it'll go away, whatever, no big deal. And a few days, 3 or 4 days later, it was still happening, and it was kind of like, it was like a headache. It felt like waking up and you're fine and you take the medication. All of a sudden I had a headache about an hour or so later. And that I could handle. It wasn't too bad. The part that was really bugging me was I had a side effect where the medication was making me extremely hungry. And the thing that, when I remember telling the doctor about this, he was like, well, that's really odd, because the medication is actually they use it also for diet, for people to help lose weight, because it's supposed to suppress the hunger. So it's supposed to make you feel less hungry. And so he's like, that's really strange, right? Like, and I just remember it was the worst, because I would eat a full meal. Like it would be a piece of chicken with vegetables and a starch, and it should fill you up for the rest of the evening. It would literally be a half an hour and I'd be hungry. And I'd be like, oh my God, I need more food. I'm starving. Because it wasn't just hunger. It was like I hadn't eaten all day. And I think about it now, and I'm like, okay, I actually don't think I was hungry. I think what it was is there was something going on in my stomach where it was reacting to it improperly. So even though I had a full stomach, it was creating that sensation of hunger.
Wow.
And it was, so and so a few months later I said, it's too much. I can't handle this. It's too much here. There's too much hunger. And then the medication he put me on, there was no effect. I wasn't noticing anything. And
was that Vyvanse first?
Yes, Vyvanse was
what
first.
was that first thing with the Vyvanse? Okay.
It was, So by September, I remember I had moved. I was in a different place. By September, the medication was literally doing nothing because I remember I would forget. It was so minimal, no work, as I would forget it for like 2 days, and there would be literally no difference. I wouldn't have any change. My brain would be the same no matter what. And so I'm like, okay, this is pointless. I'm not going to bother. I went back to him and I'm like, okay, look, I need something else. This isn't working. But, I gave him the whole spiel, and he didn't want to do any more medication because he's like, well, no matter what you take, eventually it's going to go up and up and up, and it's going to be it could be too dangerous. And so he's like, focus on other areas, change, look at your diet, do your exercise, look at meditation, yoga. And at that point I was kind of like, okay, this guy, I don't trust him anymore. First off, I don't know what the hell he's saying. He clearly did not get a referral in because it had been at least 6 months and I had heard nothing. And so I'm like, that's it. I just gave up. And the only reason I went back on it is my girlfriend was like, I think you should go back on your medication. And I'm like, okay. So I found a new doctor and I went back and I talked to him, and it was like night and day. It was an amazing change. He was, first I could understand him. There was no communication barrier.
Right.
And and then when I said to him, okay, I want to get diagnosed with ADHD. We are certain I have it. I've been on medication before. I gave him the whole spiel. I gave him my life, basically my history on everything. So trauma, relationship issues, anxious feelings, all this stuff. And he didn't just go, okay, right, and write a prescription. He said, all right. He asked me like 10 questions, and they were difficult to answer. They weren't something I could just go, oh yeah, blah blah blah. And he said, well, okay, I understand. I think you're right. You probably do have ADHD, but what I want to do is I want to get a second opinion. So I'm going to set up an appointment. We're going to get a referral to a psychiatrist. We're going to, because I think that there's a possibility you might have a general anxiety disorder, and maybe you might even have bipolar type 2.
Wow.
So, yeah, and so he's like, so I can't right now give you the medication, but come back in a month and we'll get the referral going, and so on and so on. So a month later, I called up. I was inquiring about the referral, and I guess he figured, okay, I'm going to send you the survey. I want you to fill it out. It has 3 sections. There's ADHD, anxiety, and the bipolar. And filled it out, and I had, like I said, I had a high score for the ADHD. My anxiety was in the middle, and I had a very low score for anything to do with bipolar. So that right there, and even my therapist and everybody else, like, no, you don't have bipolar. There'd be signs that and I'm like, yeah. So I got the appointment. I finally was able to, I'm like, finally I got something going. He did give me medication. He started me on the Vyvanse again, but instead he started me at 10 instead of 20. And
did they give it the option of another stimulant? Sorry.
No, he really didn't.
Okay.
He asked me what was the first one that I started on. That's how it went. And he said, okay, we'll start you on 10. And I'm like, okay. And it was encouraging. Like, I was really happy. Everything was positive. And it took just about 3 weeks for it to start to take effect, which was good because it wasn't like immediate headache straight on. So the symptoms only lasted about 4 days, and they were very minor compared to the way it was at first. And
because you had 20 milligrams.
Yeah, I had too much at first, and so that was like, every time something was different at this doctor, it just gave me more and more proof that the first guy I went to was just not not a very good doctor.
Mm.
And yeah, so now I'm at 50 milligrams, and it's the other part of this is I finally, like, when I went to see this, when I actually saw the psychiatrist, she she was very thorough. Like, it wasn't just let's talk about ADHD. She went, like, we talked about my trauma history, we talked about my anxiety, we talked about, like, family history. She asked me a lot of questions related to ADHD. I even talked to her about autism. Um, and she was like, okay, yeah, based on everything that we've talked about, and we talked about a lot, is
Mm-hmm.
you are inattentive ADHD. And we talked about the medication, and she said, this is what we'll do. Now, I think there is something with anxiety, but what we'll do is, because you are seeing your therapist and you're working on your trauma, we won't
Mm.
do anything for anxiety right now. But in the future, if it's still causing, you think it's still causing you some issues, you can talk to your doctor, and we can start you on some anxiety medication.
Mm-hmm.
So a whole bunch of stuff occurred, which I'll get into when we do the your show. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I decided to go and talk to him and go on anxiety medication.
Mm-hmm.
And he was, based on all the evidence and the psychiatrist's notes and everything, we were both fully on board. And the thing that I've noticed most is not that my anxiety levels are lower. Like, I have a lot less anxiety. I feel better. The thing that I noticed more is that the anxiety medication was like a boost to the ADHD medication.
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
because the level of focus and concentration and everything is
Hmm.
more
Yeah.
together than with just the ADHD medication.
And okay, and that makes sense because I mean, when you're anxious, you're like you can't really focus as well. It's
Yeah,
those things are affecting you. So eliminating
absolutely.
that just improve your focus even more. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I cannot recall in my entire life, to a point where I can remember, like, the significant events that I can remember that are
Mm-hmm.
related to ADHD. I cannot recall any point in time where I have felt this capable of focusing and concentration and being able to do the work, like my tasks, and do my
Mm-hmm.
work. And there, if I get stressed, or if I have a traumatic situation occur, no medication is going to do anything. It doesn't matter. That's
Right.
different. Like, if I'm
Yeah.
stressed out, I'm still going to have issues.
Mm-hmm.
But if
Mm-hmm.
I'm in a good day, and I'm feeling calm, and I'm feeling relaxed, and I'm feeling good,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's amazing how much improvement there is. And
Yeah.
it's just, I can see it myself. Like, I can't describe it. Like, I wouldn't be able to write it down and say, okay, so
Yeah.
this is what's happening. But I just
Mm-hmm.
know from a physical point of view that there's such an improvement.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really happy. And it's amazing, right? It's so it's so encouraging, just by that there is a possibility that you can get improvement.
Yeah.
And I used to think at one point that I wanted to see if I could get a non-stimulant to go along with the
Mm-hmm.
stimulant. But now I don't think I need to. I don't think I need
Wow.
it, because I'm not a hyperactive. I'm an inattentive. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not the hyperness that is
Mm-hmm.
causing me
Mm-hmm.
problems. It's that
Mm-hmm.
inability to focus and concentrate.
Right, right. You know, it's changed for me because I first identified with the inattentiveness, but I think as
Yeah.
I started to unmask and I realized I did have a lot of hyperactivity. I fidget a lot. It's hard for me to
Right.
sit still, and I didn't realize those things before. My mind's very anxious. Um, But because when I would read the questionnaire, like, oh, do you are you like if you had a motor you can't stop or something like that? Which I'm not like that. My dad is like that. He is not able to like sit still. Even he always has to be standing, and I'm not like that. So I don't know if
Right.
like maybe the hyperactivity presents itself different in me, or maybe I am inattentive and just I feel like the way even if you're an attentive type ADHD, you still have some sort of
Yes.
hyperactivity and it's more
Yes.
internalized, like it's in our brain, like with racing thoughts. Like when you said about the sleep, like my mind will not shut up at night specifically. So I
Yeah.
really related when you said that because I that is how my mind is and our minds. Remember when you're young too, and like especially with stuff that has happened to us, like it's so creative, and
Yeah.
it can make us think all kinds of things. So I really related to what you were saying to that because that's what I've always struggled with is the hyperactivity being up here in my mind. And I do twitch. I do a lot of I can't sit still. I have to like. I don't know if that's part of like the anxiety, but my anxiety is less. But I still find myself fidgeting a lot. I don't know why
Right.
that is still present in me. I don't know if that's something that you struggle with or deal with.
Yeah. That's a very interesting, and unfortunately it's a complicated situation because the
Mm-hmm.
amount of research and the amount of information that's available is not there's not enough of it to really have a good understanding and to really get a grasp on that,
Yeah.
because some people see, I can't remember. I don't know if I just discussed this with you at any point before the
Mm-hmm.
interview.
Mm-hmm.
There's more evidence and there's more research going out there more and more, and it's starting to catch on, and it's just in its infancy still, that
Mm-hmm.
trauma can create ADHD. Actually, I think I did say it briefly at the beginning. And
Well, I know you had an episode where you talked about it,
yes, we
but we
really
talked about the
briefly did.
research being minimal
Correct.
for,
Yes.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's minimal research right now that is suggesting and backing up that some ADHD diagnoses are actually due to childhood trauma or CPTSD, because the similarities in the brain development of young children who are suffering from it, it's very similar to ADHD development.
It makes sense because I remember listening on your podcast that
Yeah.
I mean trauma impacts the growth of your brain, especially if it happens when you're younger. So I can
Yeah.
see how impairment happens in certain structures of the brain, which
Yeah.
is what happens with ADHD. Like certain
Yeah.
structures of our brains are impaired. So if that's happening due to trauma, it makes sense why that would be a result, and you would
Yeah.
have ADHD symptoms moving forward. That makes a lot. And I kind of knew a little bit about that, but when you like read the research, and I was like, wow, that does make sense. Like things
Yeah.
clicked, and I'm like, wow, I can see that.
Yeah, exactly. Now the part that's complicated now is, now you if unless you're like an expert or you've had 20 years of therapy, which some people do, not a lot. The question now is, when you're having symptoms, and it could be any symptom, now you're sitting here and you're going, okay, is the symptom that I'm having an ADHD symptom, or am I actually having a traumatic event? Like, am I having a flashback and it's activating a symptom that is like ADHD or has a similar effect? Because a lot of people who have trauma, when if they're used to it, or if it's something they've been dealing with a lot, they have a tendency to find distractions or dissociate or zone out to
Mm-hmm.
avoid
Mm-hmm.
getting triggered, right? And
Right.
so a lot of the distraction part,
Mm-hmm.
it has a similar way in
Yeah.
ADHD, right? Because ADHD people get distracted easily, and they're
Yes.
doing something and they're walking around as they're doing the work, and something catches their eye and they go, oh, and all of a sudden it's like they're focused right on that, right? And so they start doing it, and and they could go through three different activities before all of a sudden they realize and come across the first one and go, damn it, I forgot to finish the first one. So
Mm-hmm.
there's that similarity between that distraction. So now they start to go, okay, am I really having ADHD moments, or am I dissociating because I don't want to get triggered, or I don't want to feel that pain or that discomfort from past experiences. It's now complicated because it's not as simple as going, oh yeah, I got distracted because my ADHD is kicking in.
It's hard
It's
to
not as
know which is
simple.
which.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think I had a an event. I had two separate events where I remember. One specifically where it happened right before I was going to see my therapist, and there was a conversation going on Twitter, and it was very triggering for me that I had to just delete my social media because and I knew that it was activating my trauma.
Right.
And as I was trying to sit there with her, one of the things that Wellbutrin helped me was intrusive thoughts. It minimized my intrusive thoughts because I dealt with those a lot, and I don't know what is responsible for intrusive thoughts, but they're diminished now with the treatment that I've had. But I remember I knew I was triggered because I was feeling emotional, and I knew why it was, and because it was connected to my trauma, and I was having a hard time focusing. I was having a lot of intrusive thoughts. I couldn't She was trying to like talk to me, and I just couldn't even. And it felt like a severe ADHD episode, but I
Mm,
knew what I was going through was because I was triggered because
right.
of my trauma, because it was that specific thing that was making me upset, and I was crying and emotional, and she had to do this like, she had to like de-escalate me. She had like, are you safe? And she just kind of had to like let me like do like some therapy to let me know you're safe, like
Yeah.
are you in harm? And like she had to kind of like bring me back to my awareness, because I was kind of like in physiologically in my mind, I think my brain, my body thought you're in trouble, you're in that moment again, but I
Yeah.
wasn't, and she had to like bring me back. But it
Yeah.
felt like a really severe ADHD episode, but I knew that it wasn't ADHD because it was directly linked to that. So when it comes to trauma, and if you only have trauma, is that like a consistent daily thing, or is it just comes up through triggers, and it's like once in a while you encounter a trigger?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It's with the trauma. If it's severe and you haven't had any work, and you know there's been no therapy, and you're fresh, like it's just starting, it can happen at any time, and anything can cause it. So it can definitely feel or imitate like ADHD, if especially if it's causing you to want to keep busy, right, or always be active, because your mind is doing it's doing its way of protecting you. It wants to keep your mind busy so that you don't go back to that trigger. Now the thing is this is where it gets interesting, and I will divulge into this more on your side on your podcast. Is you Now there's different theories. Not everybody has this theory when they're going through their therapy. Is there's a child part that is the word they call it is it's born when you're experiencing this traumatic event, and it's repetitive, right? Like, so what happens is because you're a child and you're defenseless, you have no ability to stop like what's going on, and you're basically like you are at the mercy of whoever is in charge or is responsible for you. Your part is born with the sole purpose of protecting you, is to keep you safe, and in its means, in the way it's meant to. So if you're having an issue where like, I don't know the specific details of your scenario, but if let's say you're getting triggered, and your part comes online and takes over, so it's now in control, even though the adult, there's a good chance that the adult is there kind of aware and is conscious about things that's happening, your child part is in control and it is doing what it's programmed to do or it was born to do, is to protect you. So it's doing it, that's likely a good chance that that's what was happening, is that that part was active and it was doing what it was born to do, is to protect you. So however it did whatever it had to do. And when you, the steps involved are to identify, to connect with it, to like understand it, to learn from it, and then you gain the trust of that part. And then the ultimate goal is to update so that down the road, when this happens again, instead of the part taking over, you're still in control. And you can say, okay, I'm feeling this anxious feeling, or I'm feeling this part coming on, or I think I may be getting triggered, but you're able to step in and go, it's okay, we're in a good safe space, we're all right, we're not going to get harmed. And then you're able to stay in control and stay present and focused on what's happening. That's the goal of the therapy.
That's interesting. I think if that time it happened when she was there, thankfully, and if she hadn't been there, I think I would have uh, gotten watched something, found a way to distract myself from the way that I was feeling. If she
Yeah.
hadn't been there to intercept that episode, I think
Yeah.
that's what it probably would have happened. But
Yeah.
she was there to de-escalate me, so that was good.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
she was doing the role at what point, at some point, that you would have, assuming that that's where it all led to. That's what you would at some point would be capable of doing, is
Yeah.
instead of distracting yourself or dissociating, you would acknowledge it, and then you would be the one saying, aha, I see, yeah, I know that it's scary, but we're okay.
Yeah.
That's where you would get eventually, if that was what ended up being the case, right? Like if she says,
Yeah.
oh yeah, you've got this complex trauma, and so on and so on.
We're not there yet. She's
Yeah.
on leave right now, so we're like,
Okay.
when she comes back, we'll target all my trauma. But
Yeah.
so far so good right now.
Yeah.
I don't watch TV. I don't watch the news. Like, I've learned to avoid my triggers, and that's how I've been coping
Bingo.
with my trauma. I don't watch
Yeah.
TV shows. I don't watch movies. I only watch educational stuff and sports
Right.
stuff because it doesn't trigger any of my trauma. So that's how I've been surviving so far.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
That's good. Like that's a good way of doing it. Like there's no harm in that. It's safe and it's comfortable, and that's a good stage. Like we're not people, it takes time. It's not a quick fix, despite some people out there who think it can be fixed quickly. It's, it does take time and it takes a lot of work, but that is a good step in helping your system, because the last thing you want is to put yourself in a position that is going to trigger you, because that's like putting a child in danger knowingly. So, excellent. Yeah, that's great. Well, I'm glad that you're at that stage. Yeah, awesome.
So we can like talk about this forever, but
I know.
yeah, it's just so much, and I have so much questions about the trauma, and
Yeah.
that's a whole other component on it. Sounds like a whole other hour probably, but we don't want to overwhelm your listeners with everything. I don't want to like
No, well, I do
dump
have
all
some
my.
listeners that deal with trauma too, so I don't mind talking about it a little bit. I do obviously want to stay focused on the topic, but
Yeah,
it's not a bad thing if we go a little bit into it.
yeah.
Okay, cool.
But I could definitely
So,
relate to both of those content. Like I'm
yeah,
definitely learning from your podcast.
good. Well, that's what we want. That's what I want. I
Yeah.
don't know why I say we. Haha. That's a joke. Okay. Yeah. So the last thing. Okay, I'm going to ask one more thing, and then we'll end this portion, I guess you could say, of our podcasts.
Yeah.
When when you were diagnosed and you started on obviously towards improvement, like self improvement, and you had. I know that you probably had a goal or a couple goals in mind to get to to for yourself. What would you? What was the one thing, or maybe there were a couple that you said to yourself at the beginning that you knew you needed to get somewhere, or that you wanted to really work on, or that you're that was like, okay, that's a year from now, or 2 years, that I want to be at this stage, or so I can do this, and like for self improvement, where what was that? What was that part that you were looking at or
Yeah,
wanted to
for
do?
sure. For sure, it's school. I don't have a degree. I never finished school. I changed my major like 5 times. Like I could never. I always started things. I was really good at starting things, but I sucked at finishing and staying on task.
Yeah.
So, and now that is my goal. Like I can't wait to go back to school. Like that's what I want to do. I don't want to do it just because like, oh, that's what you have to do. It's mostly because I want to prove to myself that I could do it. And yeah, that's like my number one goal. Like my dream
Excellent.
is to get my degree and use it for good. And now I have more of a
Nice.
clearer path. I know I've changed my major so many times, and even then I was like, I want to do so many things. I have so many interests. It's so hard to pick one.
Yes.
So, but now I think I found something that I'm passionate about that I know that I could stick to, and it's connected to like I want to finish my psychology degree because I did major in psychology. I finished most of my classes in community college, but then I switched over to us three different other one things after that. So I think what I want to do
Right.
is like finish my psychology degree, get my bachelor's in psychology, and then I still wanted to do nursing. So another thing that I wanted to do was nursing. So then maybe for my master's to a public health nursing, and I still do what, and I still work in the field that I work in now, which is the HIV field. I
Oh,
provide
okay.
medical care coordination for at an HIV clinic, and then yeah, and then see if maybe later on, if I get ambitious and I really love school, maybe get my doctorates. I don't know. I'm thinking, I am able to think this far now because I'm like, I could do it now. I have the tools, I have the resources. Maybe I do want to get my doctorates, and then I think I would like to focus the both like the ADHD and like compliance with medication or compliance in treatment with HIV treatment because there's so many of my clients that I can see and recognize symptoms, and I know that if their ADHD was treated, their compliance with their HIV treatment would be much better, and
Yeah.
maybe they wouldn't be so susceptible to substance abuse. There's so many things, and I
Yeah.
noticed that that's something that I'm passionate about, and that's maybe something that I could go and bring awareness to that field that it's not really. They know it's mental health, they know it's substance abuse, but like specifically, ADHD does play a part into can someone actually be complying with their medication regimen and staying going to their doctor's appointments and all that. I want to do an episode on that on my podcast soon, because I'm very passionate
Wow.
about that. And I love
Yeah.
both of those fields. So I have so many dreams and so many plans, and being treated for ADHD and getting medication now has given me a roadmap, and I'm so excited.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, you're in a situation that if you get there, like, one day when you do get there, the opportunity is incredible, and there's such a wide range of possibilities because of the fact that it's like that's not a very common field. Like there's a lot of people out there that would benefit so much from
And it's
that.
so stigmatized. Like that's why my podcast is
Yeah.
called Stigma Breakers. I'm so
Yeah.
passionate about breaking stigma on everything that's stigmatized because I work in the field. I'm constantly breaking stigma. Every time a client comes in and gets diagnosed with HIV, I have to break the stigma. I have to say, hey, your life is not over. This diagnosis is no longer a death sentence anymore.
Yeah.
And and then ADHD and all the mental illnesses that we struggle with, my family, myself, like it's all very still stigmatized in my community, my Latino community. So that's why this is such a big passion for me. And I think what you and I were talking about, how can I keep myself going and staying
Yeah.
motivated? And I think, like you said, you're passionate about what you're doing, and that's why you've been able to stay consistent with your project, with your work with CPTSD and ADHD, and I think that that's probably going to be the same for me, and I'm inspired by your work as well. So thank you so much.
Excellent. Yeah, no problem. Wow. Okay. That's excellent. Okay. Well, that's the end of my portion of this podcast. We are actually going to be doing another recording on Jamie's podcast here shortly. Or two, yeah. We are very ambitious.
Or more. I don't know. Stay tuned.
Yeah,
we might
exactly.
do some more work together.
Yes. Okay, so that's it for this. I hope you found this informative and educational and inspiring. It's always good to have other people on the show who have their own point of views and experiences when it comes to ADHD and trauma. Like we're not exclusive when it comes to a particular topic at any point. But it is always good because the more people out there that are able to discuss and be willing to share their experiences, the better that it is for everybody out there. Yeah. All right. So thank you, Jamie, again for being on the show. This was extremely fun and very educational, both for me and I'm sure for yourself.
Yes.
All right. Okay, everyone. Thanks for listening. I will talk to you later. All right. Bye for now.